Aloha from Maui. I'm Christi Friesen, and we're gonna make something fun today. So come on in my little studio and let's create. What are we gonna make? We are gonna make something that I like to call a lump cat. Now why? Well, because you just start out with a lump of clay and then you make a cat. And it's the super easiest way to make a cat ever. You don't have to worry about a bunch of anatomically correct details. It's just a lump with a tail and ears and a cat. Boom. So you can make this out of any color. You can add things. We're going to go kind of mixed media feel to it and use some polymer clay, of course, for our basic cat. But we're going to add some other little bits and pieces. So first of all, let me go through with you what you should have on hand so you can do this project with me. Okay? Well, obviously, the first thing you need is clay. I love Primo. Primo is my brand of choice, but you can use Sculpey, you can use Souffle, whatever of the Sculpey products you want to use to make your lump cat is fine by me. This is the colors that I'm going to show you, but like I said, the sky's the limit. Your cat can be any color you want. I'm using white, and I'm mixing just a little bit of brown and orange and gray granite in the mix to create a little marbled pattern, and I'll show you that. And then I have just a little bit of blush nearby for the nose. And needless to say, I'm using tiny little bits of things. So if you've got scrap clay and you want to make an assortment with your scraps, go right ahead. But if you want to do what I'm doing next, here's what I used. All right, so besides the clay, what else do we need? I'm going to use something for eyeballs. Obviously, you can use clay if you like, but I like to use mixed media things in with my clay because anything like glass or ceramic or metal that can go into the oven is perfectly fine to use with polymer clay. It doesn't shrink when it heats, so anything can be shoved in there. It'll be just fine, but it has to make sure that it's something that can go in the oven. It won't melt. So I am recommending you can have, these are little glass eyes. These are also like a teddy bear eye, also glass. You could use something like this, which is a glass rhinestone with a little hot fix back. And you see you can make eyes out of that. That could work. You just need a couple of round beads that are made out of stone or glass. Just whatever you want to make the eyes. So you'll only need one pair of eyes per cat, obviously. We need whiskers. Now I'm using Softflex, but you can use any kind of beading cable, flexible beading cable, and I've got a pair of scissors here so I can cut it into these bite-sized bits, which we'll talk about. But this is a great thing to use for your cat whiskers. If you don't have that kind of beading cable, then any kind of little regular wire will work. Like this. This is just a 28 gauge wire. Maybe your cat wants pink whiskers. Anyway, you should have some whiskery material around. I'm going to use a little bit of powder to add some color to my clay. I'll tell you about that. It's a game changer. You're going to want to use chalk or pigment or mica powders on your polymer clay because it's just so exciting. So I'm using pan pastel. So this is just a brown color. I have lots of little different colors, but you could use chalk pastels. Like I said, you can get just one of those little bars and scrape some powder off it. Use that. You can use any kind of pigment powder. You can even use eyeshadow. Any of those things will work great on your clay. And of course, a brush to apply it. Speaking of tools, if you're going to use one of these eyeballs that has a wire on it, you might need wire cutters to cut that excess off. But your tools that you always want to have around is a cutting blade, if you can, or some way of cutting your clay. And then needle nose tweezers really help in inserting those little wires. But if you have good dexterous little fingers, that works fine, or go borrow somebody else's fingers if you need to. And then just an assortment of sculpting tools are wonderful to do the clay. That's the neat thing about polymer clay is you don't have to have a ton of things to do it. Now, once you start doing it and loving it, you're going to want a ton of stuff like we would with anything, but to start with, you don't need a lot. I will also use a pasta machine or a clay conditioning machine to mix those colors together. Again, I'll tell you about that, but you can do that by hand as well. Now, one last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give my little cat a ball of yarn to play with. And I'm going to show you how to make one out of random pieces of yarn. So if you've got some yarn around, this is not going to go in the oven, so you don't have to worry about that too much. And I've got some of this color or this crazy color or whatever, but that's a good thing to have if you want them to be playing with that. All right, so let's gather up all of this stuff and get ready to go. Oh, wait, one more thing. You see this little ceramic tile? It's nice to work on a tile. The ceramic or glass tiles could just go in and out of the oven, work on it, put it in the oven, take it out, easy breezy. So if you've got that, terrific. If not, it's okay. You can use like a piece of paper to keep the clay from sticking onto a wood surface or whatever you've got going on. But this will work fabulous if you have it. All right, gather that stuff and let's get ready. The first thing we're going to do is mix up clay. Now, polymer clay needs to be conditioned, and there's lots of talk about how to condition polymer clay, but essentially all you're doing is getting it warmed up, flexible, and ready to use. Now, I use the conditioning as the time where I'm also going to mix my colors. But if you've got clay that's a bit more tough and you want to get it kind of soft and conditioned first before you start mixing all your colors, that would be great. It just depends on how fresh and soft your clay is. As you know, over time, clay changes and can get a little bit harder. So you want to make sure it's flexible and ready to use. So here's what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to set aside just a little bit of white for cheeks and stuff, which I will tell you all about, and a little bit of pink for the nose. That's all the pink I'm going to use. So if you don't have the blush and you want to just use some scrap pink or even make a little brown nose, great, no problem. Then I've got a big chunk of white here, and I am just going to cut it up into little bits so that I can easily put it in my machine. And I've got this. It's about a half a package of white, a little bit of orange, a little bit of brown. Little goes a long way. And then I love this color. This is the gray granite. It's a translucent clay. And what it does is it doesn't change the color of your mix, but will add lots of little gray flecks and that kind of look to it, which I really love. So we're going to just run this through the clay conditioning machine. And if you've never done that before, all it is you set your machine to the second widest setting and you roll it through. And that will flatten it. Then you combine everything and roll it through again. We're going to go through that process together, okay? Let me get started on that, and I will show you as we go along. So the first step is just to run everything through and flatten it all out, all right? And at this stage, then, I kind of rip it and stick it in a couple of layers and smush it together, and now I'm going to run that through my machine. Now, I ran it through once, folded it up and ran it through again. And you can keep like ripping and moving this stuff around if you want to make sure that there's plenty of layers. I love that because we're actually going to want it to be swirled. So having all of these little layers is good. So I've run it through a couple times, just twice, and I've ripped and stacked it. We're going to put it through one more time. So now you get this big, crazy mess, right? So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to roll this up. And the reason is that when I roll this up, I'm getting all of those little layers inside it, and I'm going to kind of twist it a little bit. And as I twist, I'm sort of condensing it and pushing it together. There's no wrong way to do this. This is just to get an interesting little color. And when I cut it with my blade, now by the way, your blade has a sharp end and a weirdly sharp corner. Sometimes they're in a holder so you can not have your fingers in the way. Try not to slice your fingertips off. That's never any fun. But just hold it and push it right down. And look what you get inside. Isn't that fun? Now that means our cat can have a lot more swirly business going on. So I'm actually going to just take that, put it back to back, and kind of pinch those sides together so that everything on the outside is all of this fun stuff. See that? And I'm going to chop off a little of that because I don't need that much. And I'm just going to take this, and this is going to become my cat. So I'm just mushing it with my hands. If there's an area that's got too much weird color and I don't like it, I'll just pinch and cover over it. But what I want to do is this is going to be my lump. So I'm going to want to have this lump ready for cat with some extra stuff lying around for other things. So just take that, and Make sure that it's all pressed together. There's no cracks and crevices. You can roll it, whatever you need to do to get it kind of like an oval or a pill shape. If you see any little areas that are goofy and you don't like them, oops, just shave them right on off of there. You're in control of the clay. You get to do what you want to it, but we also get to wait and see if the clay is just giving us something fun for free. So now we have a very marbled color for our cat. Is this the kind of color that you would find in a cat? Probably not, but I kind of think it's cool, don't you? And if I could get a cat that looked like this, I think I would. All right, so this is what you want. You want a lump that's about like this, okay? So you see how thick it is all around, and this is going to become our cat. So the first thing we do is we're going to pull out a tail. The way I do that is I push down. In fact, you can just kind of push it down on your surface so that it blobs out there at the bottom a little bit more. And then I use my fingers to just gently and slowly start pulling a tail out. Now you notice I'm not going because then it gets sort of flattened and it looks dumb, and then you also will probably spit all over your work surface, which isn't as fun. But I'm going to just kind of keep pulling it, putting it back down on the table, make sure that it is good, and just keep pulling and twisting and pulling and twisting and thinking happy little cat thoughts. So I'm just keeping that oval shape nice. Have a light touch it all over. Fingerprints are your friend. But you see what I'm doing? Little at a time. I'm just coaxing this tail out. How long should your cat tail be? As long as you want it. You might have a tail that goes on forever, Dr. Seuss style, or it might be a short, stubby little bobtail. That's up to you, but I would say if it's about as long as your cat is tall, you're probably doing good. So now I want to make sure that this is tall enough and my tail is good enough. And now I'm ready to give it kitty cat ears. Want to make sure it stands up. You see how that is? That's standing up very nicely there. Perfect. So now let's do the ears. So what I do first is I just kind of press the top of the head a little bit flatter. So see how it's sort of tapering here like a wedge? That's what you want to do. And now we're going to pull ears out. So I start off by pushing my finger kind of in the middle. That makes a lump on either side, which is already proto ears. So now I'm just going to pull them. The whole thing on this is if you just work slowly, little at a time, don't try to just pull the ear out all at one go. I mean, if you do that and it's successful, then of course do it. No problem there. But most of the time you can overdo it or get squished and then it's hard to fix. Plus, we don't want to mess up that beautiful little marbling we've got going on, right? So you see how I'm kind of pinching that, and you see how that's getting narrower here? So it's almost like they're little ice cream cones on the side of the head. So as I'm pinching them, I'm kind of flattening them a little bit, and pretty soon you'll have some nice little Hello Kitty ears. Hello Kitty. And then you can kind of flatten them just a bit, just like that. They're not supposed to be perfect. They're not supposed to look like real cat ears. Remember, you're making a lump cat. That means it has the idea of a cat without it passing the test for accuracy. All right, so now you can look at it and go, is my cat short and squatty or tall and thin? And you can pull if you want him taller or push if you want him squattier. That's up to you. See how he stands up? Maybe give the tail a little bit of a curl. At this stage, you should have a pretty good cat silhouette, right? I like that. All right, so now let's start playing with the face. Now, what I like to do is get that white that we had and that little teeny bit of blush for the nose and find the eyeballs that I'm going to use. Now, I showed you at the beginning a couple of choices you had for eyes. These are little glass balls on a little wire, right? And you can find them as doll eyes or teddy bear eyes. You want to make sure that they're made out of glass because the plastic ones will melt in the oven, and then you get a whole Salvador Dali melted surrealist look, which maybe is what you're going for, but if not, then I would say trim off those little excess bits. And if you're not exactly sure where the eyes would be, then what you want to do is just kind of come down from the ear, bloink, come down from the ear, bloink, and make a little dot with your needle tool so that you can figure out where it goes before you commit to putting those eyeballs in place. So what I'm doing now is I'm picking it up with my needle nose tweezers, because I got big old fat fingers, and just pressing it in place. And then once I like the placement, I can mush them around a little bit. Then I'm going to push them in so that they embed into the clay. You want them to almost be flat with the surface of the clay if you can. All right, it's already looking cute, isn't it? Now let's make the mouth. So there's a lot of ways that we could make the mouth. I'm going to show you the way that I always make it, because it's easy and fun and everybody can do it. If you come up with a way that you think is better, I'm totally okay with that. The thing about art is you get to do whatever you want, and there really aren't any rules. The only rule in art that's really hard and fast is, do you like it? And if the answer is yes, then great. If the answer is well, no, then that just means it was an exercise. It was a practice run. It was just where you were playing with it in order to get to where you can say, yes, I liked it. So see, there's no problem. All right, I'm going to take my little bit of white clay. Now you could use the same color for the body, but I like making the cheeks and chin out of a solid color. I don't know, I just think it looks cuter, but you know, practice around and see what you think, and you do what you like, you know. But I'm going to take these two little balls of clay. I'm trying to make them about the same size so they have symmetrical face, which is always good. And then I'm going to make a chin ball to go underneath it. That's going to be a little bit smaller, probably about 2/3 the size of the cheek balls. So something like that, okay? And I'm rolling it pretty good so they're nice and smooth. All right, so I've got 2 cheeks and a chin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2 balls for the cheeks and put them on first. And what they're going to be is in between and below the eyes. So they should be touching, okay? And they're below the eyes and in that space in between. And I'm going to gently push them down. I don't want them to be pancakes. I want them to be like fluffy buns, okay? Then I'm going to take that little chin and put it down right underneath. And see how cute it is with it being a little bit smaller? That looks good, doesn't it? So now I'm going to go back to that mix that we had and just take a little blob of that, about the same size as the cheeks were. We're going to make the bridge of the nose. That will give a place for the little ball of the nose to go. So I'm going to make about the same size as those guys. And I'm going to turn it into a bit of a teardrop. So see, just a little teardrop, and I'm going to put that right on top. So see how that goes? Right on top, and then I'm going to flatten it on the forehead and use my fingers or a tool to spread in the very top part of that nose bit. And use your fingers. If you're using fingerprints all over the whole thing, it will make a wonderful little texture, okay? If you have one big thumbprint right in the middle, that might not be as good. But if you're just spreading it with your fingers, awesome. If you have tools, then you can use those tools to blend in instead of your fingers if you want. And there's so many things that you can use for tools. So I'm just going to blend that in. So far, so good. Let's make a little nose. So if the nose is really big, it'll change the way this cat looks. And if the nose is really small, it'll change the way the cat looks. I'm going to just make an oval, but you could try to make a little triangle out of that if you want. I mean, that's technically more kitty-like, but I find the oval works just fine. And I'm going to put that oval right on top of that nose teardrop, right where it touches the cheek. So it's going on the tip of the cheeks a little bit and then connecting to that nose. Doesn't that look good? It's almost done. Look how great that is. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to have our cats playing with a ball of yarn, right? So I've got a little ball of yarn here. So I'm going to want to have some paws so that she or he can be holding and playing with that ball of yarn. We'll play with how to make that ball of yarn in a minute, or at least discuss it, and I'll show you some tricks. But right now we want to make some paws first, okay? So I'm going to take some of that leftover clay that we had, and I'm just going to cut another chunk so I still have that marbleized stuff in there. And roll it out a little bit, see what it looks like. So good, that's still got some marble in there, which I like. So I'm just kind of cutting off some parts of it that I like the best. That's the nice thing about making a little bit more clay than you need. You get a chance to kind of look it all over and decide what looks the best and have some choices. All right, so what I'm doing is I've just rolled this out into a bit of a snake. And then I am manipulating this into a paw. And I'm not worrying about the length, or the width, I should say. Actually, let me say that again. I'm not worrying about the length. I'm just worrying about the width because I want them to be two paws that look like they belong on the same cat. So I'll trim it to size in a minute. Right now, I'm just playing with length. There we go. All right, what do you think? I think that looks about right. So it's rounded at the end, and then I'm going to use my blade to cut this away in a minute, but for now I'll just sort of make them about the same length. So what you're going to do now is at the tip, the rounded part, I'm going to flatten it just a little because that's where the paws are going to go. And the paws are super easy. You can use a needle tool. You can use a different tool. This is the tool that I'm going to use. This is called a Wow It's Awesome tool. But you can just use anything that will have a little edge to make an indentation that starts down at the bottom and works its way up. So you see how that goes? And that will give you a little paw. See that? I'm going to do it here. I'm going to press that in and over and in and over. And that gives us cute little paws. And I know that cats have more than 3 finger toes, but I'm just going to do that because I want to. All right, so let me see. This one looks like it could be a little bit more narrow to make it be the same. Okay, so now we're going to connect it right onto the body. So what I want to do is I want to take my blade and kind of cut it at an angle of where it's going to attach to the body. All right, so I've got this little cut angle, and then I can just take it and stick it right on the side of his body. That lets me see the full paw and bring it around to the front where he can be playing with his ball of yarn. Okay, so something like that. And when you press it in with those angled pieces like that, it just presses really nicely right into the side of the body. And you can leave it like that, or you can take your tool or your fingers and blend the edges in nice and gently so it all looks like it belongs. There we go. And again, finish up with your fingers, your fingertips, putting those little fingerprint texture all over will make it look really finished. Let's get this here. So you see what I'm doing is I'm just dragging the clay from the arm, shoulder area onto the body and just smoothing it as much as I can with my tool and then the rest with my fingertips. I always find that the tool will do your blending and then your fingertips will do that last little finishing touch that makes everything look smooth. And then you can arrange this as you wish, but you're imagining that he's going to hold a ball of yarn like this here. So you're going to want to make sure that the paws look like they're in the holding a ball of yarn position. Okay. So now that we've got this cat, we've got little paws on here. We've got a nice little tail that curves on out. We've got nice little ears. Only thing left is whiskers and a little powder. And as you can tell, I'm not doing feet. You could, if you want to put feet on the bottom, absolutely go for it. I like him just being a lump. I think it works and it's easy. So that's what I'm going to do. But now we're going to work on whiskers. So what I'm going to do with whiskers is I'm just going to take my flexible beading cable and a pair of scissors and just snip off little pieces that are about inch and a half. That's probably what, about 1.5 inches long. All right, and I need 6 of them. I have more than I need here. And I'm going to take my needle nose tweezers and we're going to insert them into the cheek. So the way I do that is I pick it up and I hold it really close to the end. All right, so we want to have it pretty darn close to the end so that we can really manipulate that. And you want to kind of angle it into the body a bit. If you just go straight in like this, it's just going to poke out the other cheek. And that is awkward. So I'm going to press them in. The fun thing about this is plastic coated, flexible, usually steel or other kind of metal cable. So it's going to go in the oven just fine. The plastic itself is rather high heat plastic, so it doesn't seem to melt at all in the oven. In fact, it just gets a little sticky and holds onto the cheek, which is exactly what we want it to do. So that worked out great. And then when it's out of the oven, you can kind of curl them a little more. If you want more twist on them, you can trim them down if you put them on there and then thought, oh, those are really long. I like a good long whisker on my cats, but that's me. So you do what you want. You can make short and stubby whiskers if that makes you happy. But you see, I'm just putting it into the cheek, not into the face, but into the cheek itself on the outside edge is the best placement, I think. It's more accurate, and it just looks more cuter better. And I'm putting that angle a little bit so it's into the body and not poking out the other side. If you do poke it out the other side, that's okay. Just pull it back and clean up any mess, and then just try it again. It's all right. Okay, so look at that. Isn't that cute? Look at the whiskers on that guy. Oh, I love it. All right, last step. This is optional, but let's see powders. So putting the powders on your cat is next, but before we do that, I thought I would just mention a little ball of yarn for your cat to play with. Now, you can make a little ball of yarn easily breezily. I just kind of took some cotton yarn here and just wrapped it around a pom-pom, and you've got a nice loose ball of yarn. And you can let it just wrap all around your cat. He can hold it in his paws. He can be all twisted in it, however you want to do that. If you don't have a pom-pom, one of the things you can do is sort of a little bit of a cheat, is you can take a little bit of scrap clay, and I'm going to just take this end of the thread, the yarn here, and just shove it into the ball, right, to grab it. And then I'm going to just wrap it all around. Now, you are going to have to bake this because it's got a clay core, but that's kind of fun. You can do that, and that will give you a good center so that your ball of yarn is the right shape and size. And then you just put that in your oven, bake that center, or you could make the clay baked first. But I like having it baked so that I can just shove my clay right on in there. In fact, I can even take that end if I don't want it to unravel and kind of shove it in. And now it's tucked in there really well, and it won't come unraveling out of the yarn or out of the ball. And now the cat can play with that. So however you choose to make a little ball of yarn for your dude, go for it. So now let's do the powders. Powders are a super game changer, I think. What they do is they take all of the wonderfulness that you can do with polymer, working with the color, making blends, and they add to it just the ability to highlight certain areas with intense or subtle color. So I use chalk stuff. So my favorite is Pan Pastel. It's a brand, and it comes in these little pans. It's so compatible with polymer. But just about any kind of chalk powder, pigment powder, mica powder, pastel powder will work fantastic. And all you're going to do is get a little brush, and I like to kind of dab some in here and then kind of tap it on my tile to make sure that I can control how much I put on. And then with a soft brush, watercolor type brush, I'm just going to add a little bit of powder wherever I think it's amusing. So on the paw tips, which if you had little white paw tips, that would look great. You don't have to add any powder to that, but I'm going to put a little bit of darkness on those paw tips. And then how about a little bit on the tips of the ears? If you're trying to make a specific cat breed like a Siamese, this is a great way of doing it. Now, what about a little bit around the eyes? Give it a little cat mascara. Or, again, like that Siamese kind of look. And I think if that is, and you're going to get powder on the glass eye, don't worry. It'll come right off. I think I'm going to give it a little bit on that nose bridge, too, to kind of give a mask to it, because I think that looks fun. And then what about, we'll do just a little bit on the tip of the tail. And what if we gave it kind of the look of a little bit of stripe? So just add a little bit there that looks like a stripe or two. Why not? And then you see what we get? We get this fun little additional accents. What do you think? Really fun, huh? All right, let's talk about baking. Okay, your cat is done. It's on its tile. It's ready to bake. How? You're going to use just your home oven, or most people like a tabletop oven to bake the polymer clay on. You're going to preheat your oven to the temperature specified on your package. Put it in once the oven is preheated, and you have an oven thermometer inside to keep an eye on that temperature so it stays correct. And then you just put it in on its tile. You go for the amount of time on your package. Then you either take it out of the oven or turn the oven off and let it cool completely before you get to play with it. And here it is out of the oven, all done. And so now, of course, he can hold the little ball of yarn in his hands, or if you even want to, you could sort of wrap it around him like he's all playing with it or whatever. And he's ready. Isn't that cute? Well, how fun was that? I kind of love making these things. I've made them for years, and so many of you probably like cats anyway, so this was a no-brainer, correct? So why don't you just experiment now? Why don't you make little kitties that are tinier, like baby ones, or make them out of wild, crazy colors, or mix it up. Who knows what they're playing with? You could create some other little cat toy. Maybe they're playing with a feather, or who even knows what. You'll come up with something fun. But I hope you just have a lot of fun making just a whole flock of lump cats. Happy creating!